Oh, and another global news in Indonesia, days of torrential rain have triggered deadly landslides on the island of Java. Officials say at least 2 people have been killed and 20 others remain missing.
Early this morning, the earth itself gave way beneath central Java as days of unbroken rainfall finally pushed the land past its breaking point. What began as steady monsoon showers transformed into a catastrophic cascade of mud, rock, and uprooted forest that tore entire communities from the hillsides in seconds. Villagers described hearing a low, thunderous roar before the ground began to shudder. And then a wall of earth came crashing down, swallowing everything in its path. Roads are gone. Homes flattened. Entire stretches of farmland erased. Search teams are scrambling through knee-deep mud as loudspeakers echo through the darkness, calling out names of the missing. The scale of devastation is still unfolding. 3 villages in the high-risk slopes of Cilacap Regency were hit hardest, where dozens of houses were buried instantly. Local officials say at least 2 people are confirmed dead, while more than 20 others remain missing beneath unstable debris fields. The exact number is likely higher, but many areas are still unreachable. With communication towers toppled and electricity grids crippled, some communities have been completely cut off since the disaster struck. Rescue teams are forced to navigate by handheld radios and dim lamps as fog rolls through the valleys and more rain continues to fall. The conditions leading up to this collapse were a perfect storm. Central Java's soils were already saturated from intermittent downpours throughout the past month. Every hillside, every terrace, every slope was holding more water than it could safely contain. When the latest burst of torrential rain hit the region, the mountains couldn't take any more. Water seeped deep into volcanic soil, loosening the roots that held the hillsides in place. Landslide warning signs, cracks in the ground, tilting trees, small rockfalls, had already appeared in some areas days earlier, but the scale and timing of the collapse came with almost no warning. Residents who lived through the night described chaos and fear. Families scrambled in the darkness, carrying nothing but their children and the clothes on their backs. Some ran barefoot through thick mud. Others sheltered in makeshift huts as the ground continued to tremble, unsure if another landslide was seconds behind the first. When dawn arrived, the view was unrecognizable. Places that were once vibrant villages with livestock, rice paddies, gardens and homes had been replaced by massive scars of sliding earth stretching for hundreds of meters. Emergency responders are facing brutal conditions. The ground is unstable underfoot and every step risks triggering a secondary collapse. Heavy machinery can't reach many of the affected cliffsides, forcing rescuers to work with shovels, ropes and bare hands. Helicopters are on standby, but weather conditions remain dangerous. Thick clouds and low visibility mean pilots can't safely reach the slopes, forcing most operations to take place from the ground. Rescuers say the mud is so deep in some areas that even trained dogs are unable to pick up scents quickly. The rainfall is not letting up. Meteorologists say a slow-moving low-pressure system over the Java Sea continues feeding moisture into central Java's interior. For the next 24 to 48 hours, the forecast shows more rain. Sometimes light, sometimes heavy, always adding pressure to an already fragile landscape. Every new millimetre of rain increases the danger. New landslides could break loose at any moment. Villages that survived the initial collapse are now under rainfall monitoring alerts. Community leaders are moving residents to higher ground, not because they want to, but because they have no choice. Infrastructure across the region is failing under the strain. Major connecting roads have been washed out, leaving entire districts isolated. The main toll road between Yogyakarta and Solo is shut down after sections of pavement cracked and sank into swollen floodwaters. Several bridges collapsed as mud flows undercut their foundations. Railways are suspended. Schools, mosques and government buildings are being used as emergency shelters, but they too are overwhelmed as more displaced families arrive each hour. Some shelters have run out of blankets and clean water. Others are rationing food until supply lines can be temporarily restored. Hospitals in Yogyakarta and surrounding areas are operating at emergency capacity. Doctors and volunteers report long lines of patients with injuries ranging from broken limbs to respiratory distress caused by mud inhalation. Many survivors showed up drenched, shaking, and covered in abrasions after crawling through jagged debris. Medics have been treating hypothermia cases through the night. Ambulances are stuck behind roadblocks, forcing medical teams to walk on foot to reach some of the injured. The region's limited number of trauma facilities is already stretched thin, and additional patients are expected to arrive as rescues continue agricultural land. The backbone of Central Java's rural economy has suffered staggering damage. Thousands of hectares of rice fields and plantations have been inundated or buried beneath meters of mud. Terraced farmland carved into volcanic slopes, which fed thousands of families, has collapsed. Farmers are reporting entire seasons of labour erased in a single night. Livestock drowned in mud flows or were swept away. For a region relying heavily on agriculture, the long-term economic cost of this disaster may rival the immediate loss of life. And this disaster didn't emerge from nowhere. Experts have warned for years that many slopes in Central Java are dangerously unstable. Especially during the rainy season, rapid deforestation has weakened the natural support systems that anchor the soil. Land conversion for housing, roads and farms has further destabilized terrain. Illegal mining operations have carved out hillside support structures, redirecting water channels and accelerating erosion. Combined with more intense rainfall patterns tied to a warming climate, these factors have created conditions ripe for widespread slope failures. In many of the affected villages, the terrain itself seems alive, shifting, cracking, repositioning as water continues seeping into the earth. Rescue workers say they can hear the creaks and groans of weakened slopes above them. Every vibration, every movement sends tension through the team. Some operations have been paused for safety, but where voices or tapping sounds are heard beneath the debris, rescue efforts push forward regardless of the risk. The golden window for saving lives is small, and every passing minute counts. Engineers monitoring the region's rivers warn that flood conditions could worsen. Tributaries feeding into major waterways are swelling rapidly. Riverbanks near low-lying communities are weakening. In some areas, rising water levels threaten to breach old earthen dams built decades ago. If any of these structures fail, entire downstream districts could face sudden floods that would magnify the disaster exponentially. Contingency plans are being drafted, but with access roads cut and emergency teams already spread thin, officials fear they may not be able to respond fast enough if another crisis unfolds. As the night stretches into another uncertain day, thousands of displaced residents are huddled in crowded shelters, listening to the relentless sound of rain on tin roofs. Many are wearing borrowed clothes. Children cling to their parents, still shaken by the roar of the mountain collapsing. Some families don't know whether their loved ones are safe or still buried under the mud. Volunteers are distributing food and blankets as quickly as supplies arrive, but demand continues to grow. International support is beginning to move into position. Neighbouring nations are preparing to send search specialists, medical teams, and equipment. But even with outside help, the scale of this disaster remains immense. The terrain is difficult, the rain is unceasing, access routes are crippled, and the psychological weight on survivors is heavy. The knowledge that entire portions of their communities were erased while they slept. As scientists study the conditions that fueled this collapse, one message is becoming painfully clear. Extreme rainfall events in Indonesia are becoming more frequent and more intense. Warmer ocean temperatures feed moisture into storm systems. Atmospheric patterns shift, bringing heavier downpours in shorter windows of time. What was once considered a rare rainfall event is now happening with alarming regularity. For a region already vulnerable due to its steep terrain and human-driven land changes, these climatic shifts are a dangerous accelerant. Tonight, Central Java faces a race against time. The mud is still moving, rain is still falling, survivors are still trapped, and rescuers are still digging. Through exhaustion, through danger, through the uncertainty of what each new hour may bring. Thousands remain displaced with no clear timeline for when they can return home. The death toll is expected to rise as rescue teams reach areas that have been inaccessible since the first collapse. The full scope of this disaster will not be known for days, but one truth is already undeniable. This catastrophe exposes the fragile balance between nature and human vulnerability. Decades of land misuse, inadequate planning, and environmental degradation turned heavy rain into a lethal force capable of erasing entire communities. And as climate patterns continue shifting, Central Java's devastation becomes a warning for millions living in similar landscapes across Indonesia and beyond the Earth gave way this morning. But the warnings were there long before, and until decisive action is taken, disasters like this will only grow more frequent, more violent, and more unforgiving.